The young waiter's voice carries across the crowded restaurant as he mimics the elderly man's trembling hands. "Sorry, sir, but maybe you should eat somewhere that serves baby food instead." 83-year-old Frank Morrison sits alone at the corner table, his weathered fingers shaking as he tries to lift his coffee cup while other diners turn to stare. The Medal of Honor hidden beneath his worn jacket weighs heavy against his chest. What happens next will leave you speechless. If stories like this remind you why we must never forget our heroes, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone being disrespected who turned out to be more than they seemed? This story will change how you see the elderly veteran at the next table. Frank Morrison had been coming to Murphy's Diner for 3 years now. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m., he would order the same thing: black coffee and apple pie. The old man never caused trouble, always left a decent tip and kept to himself. But today was different. The trembling in his hands had gotten worse over the past few months. What started as a slight shake had become more noticeable, making simple tasks like drinking coffee or cutting his pie nearly impossible. Frank knew it was just age catching up with him, but he refused to let it keep him locked away in his small apartment. Tyler, the 22-year-old waiter, had been watching Frank struggle for the past 10 minutes. Other customers were starting to notice too. A young mother pulled her child closer as Frank's shaking hand knocked over the sugar dispenser. An elderly couple at the next table whispered and pointed. Tyler walked over with a smirk on his face. He had been having a bad day. His girlfriend had broken up with him that morning, and his manager had already yelled at him twice for being slow with orders. The old man's shaking was just another annoyance he had to deal with. Sir, maybe you should consider eating somewhere else, Tyler said loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. This isn't really the right place for someone with your condition. Frank looked up with tired eyes. He had heard this before in other places, but never quite so publicly. "I'm sorry if I'm causing a problem," he said quietly. "I just wanted some coffee and pie." Tyler rolled his eyes and spoke even louder. "Look, I get it. You're old, but you're making a mess and making other customers uncomfortable. Maybe there's a nursing home cafeteria that would be more suitable for you." The restaurant fell silent. 23 people turned to watch the scene unfold. Frank's face turned red with embarrassment. His hands shook even more as he tried to steady himself. A businessman at the counter shook his head in disgust. "That's no way to treat an elderly customer," he muttered, but not loud enough to get involved. Tyler wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Check this out," he said to his coworker behind the counter. "Old man can't even hold a coffee cup without spilling it everywhere. Maybe we should get him a sippy cup." The coworker, Jenny, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. She was new and didn't want to cause trouble with Tyler, who had been there longer. Frank tried to stand up, but his legs were shaky too. He nearly fell back into his chair, which made Tyler laugh out loud. "Oh wow, this is even better than I thought. You can barely walk either." A family of 4 at a nearby table started gathering their things to leave. The father threw some money on the table and guided his wife and 2 young children toward the exit. "We don't need to see this," he whispered to his wife. But Tyler was just getting started. He walked around Frank's table, still recording with his phone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Murphy's Diner, where we serve coffee to people who can't even drink it." He turned to Frank again. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disrupting other customers' meals." Frank's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, I just want to finish my coffee." "I'm not bothering anyone." Tyler laughed again. "Not bothering anyone? Look around, old man. Half the restaurant is staring at you. The other half is trying to leave. You're bad for business." An older woman at the counter finally spoke up. "Young man, that's enough. Leave him alone. He's not hurting anyone." Tyler turned to her with the same smirk. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. If you don't like it, you can leave." 2. The woman stood up angrily and walked toward the door. "I've been coming here for 15 years, and I've never seen such disrespect. You should be ashamed of yourself." As she left, Tyler called after her. "Have a great day, and thanks for the business advice from someone who probably hasn't worked." A day in decades, Frank finally managed to stand up, his whole body shaking now. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet to pay for his coffee. As he did, something fell out and clattered to the floor. Tyler bent down to pick it up, still smirking. "What's this, old man? Some kind of fancy jewelry?" He looked at the blue case that had fallen open, revealing a star-shaped medal hanging from a light blue ribbon with 13 white stars. The smirk slowly faded from Tyler's face as he realized what he was holding. The restaurant grew even quieter as other customers began to notice what was happening. Frank's voice was still quiet, but somehow stronger now. "That's my Medal of Honor, son. I received it in Vietnam in 1969. Tyler's hands started shaking as he held the medal. He had seen enough war movies to know what this meant. The Medal of Honor was the highest military decoration, given only to those who showed extraordinary courage in battle. Frank continued, his voice steady despite his trembling. "Body. I was a sergeant in the 1st Infantry Division. My unit was ambushed near Saigon. 12 of my men were trapped in a bunker that was on fire. I went in 4 times to pull them out, even though the enemy was shooting at me the whole time. I got shot twice, but I got all 12 of my boys out alive." The entire restaurant was now listening. Tyler's face had gone completely white. He tried to hand the medal back to Frank, but his own hands were shaking too badly. Frank took the medal gently and put it back in the case. "After the war, I came home to people spitting on me and calling me names. I thought those days were over. I thought maybe, after all these years, people would treat old soldiers with a little respect." Tyler opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at him. The businessman at the counter was shaking his head. The family that had been about to leave had stopped at the door and turned back. Frank put the medal back in his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. He set it on the table next to his barely touched coffee and piece of pie. "Keep the change, son, and maybe think about how you treat people. You never know what they've been through or what they've done for their country." As Frank walked slowly toward the door, every person in the restaurant watched in complete silence. His legs were still shaky, and he had to stop once to steady himself against a chair, but he held his head high. Tyler finally found his voice, but it came out as a whisper. "Sir, wait, please. I'm sorry. I didn't know." Frank stopped and turned back. The old soldier's eyes were sad but not angry. "Son, you shouldn't need to know what someone has done to treat them with basic human respect. That old lady who just left? She might be someone's grandmother who raised 5 kids while her husband was at war. That businessman over there? He might volunteer at the homeless shelter every weekend. You never know people's stories." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. He was no longer the cocky young man who had been making fun of an old customer. He was just a scared kid who realized he had made a terrible mistake. Frank continued walking toward the door. The businessman at the counter stood up and started clapping. Then the family that had been about to leave started clapping too. Soon, the entire restaurant was on their feet, applauding the old soldier as he made his way out. Tyler sank into Frank's empty chair and put his head in his hands. Jenny, his coworker, came over and sat down beside him. She had tears in her eyes too. "Can't believe what I just did," Tyler whispered. "I mocked a war hero. I made fun of a man who saved 12 lives in combat." Jenny put her hand on his shoulder. "You made a mistake, a big one, but maybe you can learn from it." Tyler looked up at her. How do I fix this? How do I make it right? Jenny thought for a moment. Maybe you start by figuring out how to find him and apologize properly. And maybe you think about why you treated him that way in the first place. Tyler nodded slowly. He picked up his phone and deleted the video he had recorded. Then he walked to the window and watched Frank slowly make his way down the street, his shoulders straight despite his shaking hands. The old soldier disappeared around the corner, but Tyler knew he would never forget this day. He had learned that the frail old man sitting alone at a corner table might be the bravest person in the room. And he had learned that treating people with dignity and respect isn't something you do only after you know their story. It's something you do because they're human beings who deserve it. Frank Morrison continued his slow walk home, the Medal of Honor safe in his pocket. He had faced enemy fire in the jungles of Vietnam, and he had faced the cruelty of a young man who didn't understand the cost of freedom. Both had hurt, but both had also shown him something important about courage, dignity, and the kind of person he wanted to be. The next Tuesday, Frank would return to Murphy's Diner for his usual coffee and apple pie, and Tyler would be there, ready to serve him with the respect and honor he had always deserved.